Welcome to Wealth Beyond the White Coat, a show where we dive deep into the world of financial freedom for dentists and medical professionals. I'm your host, Deren Flesher, a dentist with a passion for uncovering the strategies that lead to a prosperous life beyond the office. Every episode will explore the avenues of alternative investing, tax mitigation, and secrets to build wealth that the textbooks don't teach you. Whether you're looking to enhance your financial literacy, discover new investment opportunities, or simply find a better way to manage your money, this is the place where your financial health is the core of our conversations. Welcome to Wealth Beyond the White Coat, where your journey to financial clarity and freedom begins. All right, everyone, welcome into Wealth Beyond the White Coat. Today I've got part 1 of 2, where I was a guest on another podcast called the Dentalpreneur podcast. It's with host Dr. Mark Costas. He is a world-renowned dental operations and practice management consultant. He's also a dentist, so he's been there, done that clinically, and had, I think at one time, 10 offices, 16 offices in total. I'm part of his group as a mastermind member, and over time, as I've increased my skill and desire to help others and share concepts, grown into the role of a coach within the group. So you'll hear him talk about black belts and black belt coaches. Those are the highly efficient operators who have really low overhead and high profitability and really great systems in their practice to where they've reached the peak from a operation standpoint in his circle. And so anyway, I wanted to give you a little context and background. So this podcast will end up in his feed. If you aren't familiar with him or haven't ever listened to his podcast, go check it out because it's got a lot of practice management and really operational things to improve the business itself. And then obviously what we talk about here is the wealth beyond the white coat. His is a great podcast for the actual operation of your business. And then obviously what we want to talk about here is the stuff above and beyond what you can do in the clinic. So those two together really provide a lot of great insights for managing your money and managing it well to maximize your opportunity and hopeful freedom as far as what you want to do with your time and effort. So anyway, welcome to Wealth Beyond the White Coat, featuring Mark Costas and the Dentalpreneur.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to another episode of the Dentalpreneur podcast. I'm your host, Dr. Mark Costas. What's up, my friends? I hope you're doing great out there today. If you notice that my voice is a little strained, this is my first podcast after coming back from the Dental Success Summit in San Antonio, Texas. It was a great weekend, big week leading up to it for prep, and I was there since Tuesday. It's just a really fun time. In addition to all the logistics of putting a live event on, you're having people fly in from all over the country, your best friends, you're hanging out, you're socializing, you're talking in loud environments. That puts a strain on your voice. And then I was on stage probably, 5, 6, 7 hours talking to a large audience of about 700 people. So my voice is a little tired, but I'm still riding the wave of dopamine and energy drinks and coffee that is a live event. One of the presenters or one of the panelists from that live event was our guest today, and that's Dr. Deren Flesher, who sat on a panel about KPIs with Dr. Addison Killeen. Deren, how you doing today, my friend?
I'm great, Mark. Good to see you. It's only been a couple days, but that was a great event. I liked it a lot more in April this year than June. The weather was awesome. Got a lot of patio sitting in the evenings, and it was great.
Yeah, I loved it. There's pros and cons to April. We used to do it in March. I don't know if you remember this, every single year. And then it started getting pushed back like a week here and a week there just because of availability of venues. And then it came to a point where there was a jump that you have to make between like early April and the middle of the summer because people have graduations, it's wedding season, spring break, family vacations. So we made the jump to June. And then this year, they had no availability in San Antonio or in Scottsdale during June. Everything sells out like 16 months ahead of time. So we moved back to April, which was awesome. But then part of the things that kept us from having it in April in the first place popped up, and it was hard to get people working around weddings and graduations and spring breaks. And so it was tough for not only the sponsors, but for a lot of the attendees. but we
I'm
still
sure your
managed to sell
team,
out.
yeah, I'm sure your team
What's
loved
that?
telling, I'm sure your team loved you telling them they only had 10 months this time too.
Exactly. And
Yeah.
sponsors and attendees and for everybody. But we're back to June next year. It's going to be in Dallas, which is going to be really hot and humid, but um, we're hoping to have a really good turnout again. Tell us a little bit about what you guys spoke specifically about in the KPI panel. I'd love to hear a little bit about that. And off air, you and I were just talking about some of the coaching calls that you had just today. And I'd love to maybe, without using specific names, talk about some of the scenarios that you're working through with some of our awesome members.
Yeah, of course. Yeah. And I like Frisco for next year. That's drivable for me. So I appreciate you doing that for me.
Yeah, man.
Yeah. So the KPI panel was great. I'm not a big stage speaker, but I like having conversations with people and working through things. I love doing the coaching calls because it's real intimate and I get to work through their problems and hopefully nothing ever gets solved in the moment, but it's nice to maybe break through a roadblock or move them in the right direction. So I like doing those a lot. But yeah, the KPI panel, I remember my 3 questions specifically. I honestly blacked out for the rest of it, but I'm happy to recap what I did there. I know we talked
Yeah,
about
yeah.
hygiene efficiency, some of the things I'm seeing in the calls, which are one of the big things. I'm having those even this week where still supplies are creeping up on people. People are not taking advantage of DSN formularies. People just lose track. They handed it over to an assistant long ago and they start to just hit reorder and they quit comparing prices and making sure everything's good there. Just centering the same things we do in DSI as a whole is coming back to the beginning, coming back to the basics, making sure that everything's in a good place. You can't just keep layering up and forgetting about the base layers there. You've got to go back and revisit them every once in a while. So that was one of the
Yeah.
questions. We talked about that. And then hygiene, we talked about Lee and Aaron talked before me about just setting your team up for success with efficiencies. Aaron did specifically, he talked about prepping the room and not wasting time and making sure you walk in and are ready to go. You're not wasting 10, 15 minutes adjusting the chair and the light and making sure the water's right and all that. So I built on their answers, his specifically with efficiency and the hygiene op. My office, we shoot for 3.3 times pay. My office has historically been that or higher, and we've even been in the fives at some points. So the question was around how do you achieve that? What do you do to make that happen? And
Yeah.
it's a little bit about prepping for that moment, making sure insurances and what's covered and what's not, and what's the out of pocket cost. So we're not having to run up and down the hall and answer questions, but it's also about physical preparedness in the room too. Like to Aaron's point, if you're going to do sealants and fluoride, you got to have your dry shield ready and your sealant and fluoride material in little fold top baggies in your op ready to go. You're not having to spend 3 to 5 minutes running around gathering things. I mean, you just lose steam, you lose motivation to want to go do that when you're working in a 60-minute time window. You just feel like you don't have time. But if you've already shortcut and made the time available because you've done all those things ahead of time, that really lends to productivity in that way. So that was my answer to that question. What was my third question? I don't remember. Oh, it was about legacy point investing and what do people do
Oh,
there.
yeah.
So we talked about the basics of investing. Obviously said you should always be saving early and being disciplined and having consistency. And I didn't use the specific term. If you're going to be in the market, dollar cost average, don't try to time things. Don't get in your own head about when's the right time and should I dump a big bolus into the market at this time. Like just be consistent, chip away at it. But on the inverse of that, I talked about if you can save a dollar, if you can put a dollar back in your pocket today, think about that compounding every year. If you can do that consistently every year. And so there's things you can do with planning, whether it's what I would call traditional kind of things we talk about all the time with making sure you have a retirement plan and certain deductions you get in your business with cost seg or a 6,000 pound vehicle or home office deduction. Those are the base level things that you should definitely be doing. But if you can also make investments, if you've got extra capital every year, you're making a good sum of money and you want to get out of those top federal tax brackets, there's some things you can do that have tax advantages in that way, and you reduce your taxable income through deploying capital that actually pays you every year, in addition to the IRS taking less of your money every year. So that was one of the things I talked about in the kind of compounding idea of compounding your tax savings by being smart and strategic with what you do in that way. So that's what we do in Legacy Point and want to share that with people too. Hey, I just want to interrupt real quick and say thanks for listening to the podcast. If you didn't know, we have an associated Facebook group also called Wealth Beyond the White Coat. Over there, you can ask your questions, get feedback from group members, and have a close community of medical professionals who are likely interested in the same things as you. Whether it's alternative investing, tax mitigation, ways to keep more of your money, or even protect your assets, we're going to discuss those things in the group. Additionally, we have a private investors club called Legacy Point. As a member, you'll get exclusive discounts to preferred vendors, and you'll get access to private investments that you'll find nowhere else. Whether it's hotels, apartments, oil and gas, equipment rental, you name it, we'll be discussing those details and offering those investments to members only inside Legacy Point Group. If you want to learn more about that, please contact me or simply email info, I-N-F-O, at legacypointgroup.com or go to the website legacypointgroup.com. And Wealth Beyond the White Coat podcast listeners get an exclusive discount if you use the code WealthBeyond. That's all caps, all together, WealthBeyond at checkout. I'd love to have you in the group, and I'd love to see you making more passive income as you move towards financial freedom, whether it's freedom to retire early, spend more time with your family, go on more vacations, or just do more of what you love while you're in the operatory. I'd love to see you doing that as part of Legacy Point. So here's to improving your financial health.
Yeah. What have you seen? You became very conscientious. You've had a couple liquidation events, a couple nice, I guess you can call them windfalls. I hate to use that word because people are like, it all
wasn't given.
There's always levels, right? So it's, for some people, a windfall is 9 figures. For some people, a windfall is 6 figures. For some people, it's like mid sevens. It doesn't matter, but you've had a couple nice windfalls, and that's helped your overall net worth. But then there's some strategies that you have to put in place in order to mitigate some of the tax hit, some of the tax burden that you're going to be left with after you get a lump sum of cash. Was it at that point that you started investigating and really becoming an expert in tax mitigation strategies and different ways to offset our tax liability as business owners and as people who have experienced a liquidation event?
Yeah, so my entrepreneurship kind of bug has always been there. Even as a dentist, my whole goal was to eventually sell the business. It wasn't something I wanted to be in the chair in the op for 30, 40 years and pop my head up and sell it at 65 and call it a career. I always had a goal of building something to sell, from the location and the name and how many ops and all that stuff. Like, that was designed with purpose. But at the same time, I've always liked to have things other than dentistry in my daily activity. I do coaching calls and stuff now, but previously I've done things like invest in local businesses, just things that are interesting to me. So my initial kind of iteration of all this was just interest in entrepreneurship and business. But then, yeah, when I built and sold Modento, I had a big tax problem, or a potential tax problem if I didn't solve it. And so it put me in this place of, okay, instead of only thinking about business and revenue and all that, like, what else is there? And so I learned about what are called opportunity zones, which can, from a tax perspective, offset a long-term capital gain, which is if you sell a business that you've owned for 12 months or more is a long-term capital gain. Unfortunately, the time window to solve that problem is only 6 months after you sell it, for the most part. And so I didn't want to fast forward that learning so fast that I made bad decisions. Even though I found things that checked that box from a technicality perspective, they didn't check my box as far as feeling like it was a good investment. So I declined to do that the first time around. I literally just paid the taxes, and it wasn't the end of the world, but it wasn't my preferred outcome. So that set me off on this process of just learning more about the tax side of investing and how you could maybe do more from a planning perspective to maybe keep more of your money annually as just a high income earner and a business owner. But also, if you have another windfall, and fortunately for me, I was fortunate to have that happen just a couple of years after the first one. And so I'd already been down that road for 2.5 years now. I'd learned enough. I'd met enough people. I'd drilled down to find the right solutions for the problem that checked all the boxes. And so I deployed a ton of that capital last year. Just literally paid my taxes 3 days ago. My estimation, we always postpone the actual filing, but wrote a check, and it was not very much money compared to the sale. Did some good planning. And so anyway, yeah, those are the problems we want to solve for people. Is if you have a big windfall, what can you do there? It's not just enough to know what to do, but having the right people to do it with and enough diversity to feel like you don't put all your eggs in one new basket. You want to make sure you spread them out a little bit. But also the bigger problem, the more pressing problem people have, especially as practice owners, is how can I keep more of my money year to year? How can I solve that problem? So those are the two main focuses for us. There's other things that we can obviously talk about that don't have either of those advantages. And usually the returns are better. They've got some other advantage where it's worth that trade, but those are the two big problems we want to solve.
Yeah, I love that. And it's interesting how many high income earners, to me, first of all, W-2 income, high income earners don't have a whole lot to lean on, right? Unless you create some sort of an LLC that you are where you have a legitimate business and you're running some of your expenses through that. It's very difficult to offset tax liability if you have a traditional W-2. Associates
Yeah.
have a difficult time. I know that a lot of medical professionals that I know that have sold out to hospitals, et cetera, the vast majority of physicians now are W-2 employees. It's very difficult for them to mitigate their large tax bill. They're looking at 38 to 47% of their total income going to state and federal taxes, that's just got to be a punch in the gut. So it's difficult, but we do have a lot of benefits as business owners to legitimately utilize the tax code and decrease our tax liability. And some of the strategies that you guys utilize or that you've utilized personally, you can't Google. This is advanced stuff. It's not just the Augusta rule. It's not just a heavy vehicle. It's not just a home office or even something that could be more exotic, accelerated depreciation of your commercial building. It's deeper than that. Maybe opportunity zones are one of your favorites, but maybe you could talk a little bit about what that is just from a high level, because I know that this isn't living. You've utilized this strategy many times, but what is an opportunity zone? How can you utilize it to offset windfall income? And is it usable to mitigate your tax bill, just ongoing income, ongoing profitability within a business? Can you use an opportunity zone for a benefit there?
Hey, I just wanted to interrupt the show real quick and tell you about an exclusive member discount for Legacy Point Group members. The company is called Gelt, and they're both tax planning and tax preparation. We connected because their CEO actually comes from a family of physicians, and he understands the financial complexities that healthcare professionals face these days. Legacy Point is honored to partner with Gelt because it's our shared mission to empower successful professionals with optimal tax and financial outcomes. For your 20% discount off financial planning and tax preparation and priority access with their onboarding, become a member over at legacypointgroup.com. Yeah, so an opportunity zone, and I probably won't get all these dates correct, but I believe they were created in 2016, somewhere around there, with a 10-year runway, essentially. And what it was, or what they are, is governments have essentially done a survey. They found areas in each city and other areas where they want to stimulate growth. They want to essentially move traffic, move commerce and business to those areas. And so the way that the government dangles carrots out there is through tax benefits, tax incentives. So it's the same way with oil and gas. That's another strategy we use to mitigate taxes annually. To answer your last question, there's a lot of benefit. When the government wants you to do something, that's where the benefits come into place, where they want to give you a little bit back to incentivize you to do that thing. So in the same way, opportunity zones are places, areas of town where in 2016, they said, we would like to stimulate things here. So if you go build a business here, we will give you breaks for doing that as the person who put this thing together. So as an investor, you also get some of those things passed on to you. And what the big one is, in this case, is if you had a long-term capital gain, like a 1031 in real estate, if you move that gain into an opportunity zone, you delay the taxes. Now, a 1031, you delay it indefinitely, but in an opportunity zone, you delay it until the tax year 2026, so due in 2027. So as we get a little bit closer to 26, it becomes a little less advantageous. You're not kicking the can that far down the road, but it still has some benefits. And again, going back to my original point when I sold Modento, you need the investment to be good first. Like that's the first box that needs to check. It needs to actually have a good return. If you're going to save 25 or 30 cents, but you lose the whole dollar in the end, not worth it. So you need to make sure you're working with the right people and the right investments. and then look for the right opportunity as far as what to do with that money. And yeah, so opportunity zone. So fast forwarding now, we're 8 years later. Fortunately, those original zonings, things migrate year to year, decade to decade. And so a lot of those things where they drew a line and said, this is an area of town where we want people to go, and typically those are not great areas. 8 years later, things might have shifted. Now that's on the other side of the line. It's actually a good area. There's literally, we're just down in San Antonio. There's a hotel being built there right now. It's a Marriott, and it's a block off the Riverwalk. That's in an opportunity zone. So you can invest in a Marriott, one block off the Riverwalk, and get the tax benefits for it. There's also one that I personally invested in was at the end of the Strip in Vegas, where if you know what's coming, that they're moving all these sports teams and a lot of things at the other end of the Strip, that was an opportunity zone when they zone these things. And that's why a lot of things are going there. People might wonder why the heck everything's coming to Vegas. They wanted it to come there because they gave the tax benefits and the incentives to do it. So you could invest in a hotel there as well. So those are a couple examples of what and why and how we got here. So back when I was looking in 21, the things I were finding were still in the bad areas. And so that's why they weren't good for me. But now, as we're getting closer to the end of this road, a lot of those lines have shifted, and things that you can put in those areas are actually good investments in a good area, and they weren't at the time. And then one last thing I'll say about that, and I'll answer your question too about what can you do? Can you do this with taxes today? There is legislation in Congress right now because a lot of well-to-do people have done these things, and they don't want this tax bill to come up in 26 and pay it in 27. So there's talks about pushing this down the road a couple of years and seeing where that goes from there. So even though I said it's becoming a little less advantageous today, there's possibility the goalposts move a little bit and your deadline moves out a little bit further. So it could be a great deal still today. And the last part about you cannot do this with ordinary income. So it has to be in that specific bucket of money for long-term capital gains. But then, like I said a minute ago, with oil and gas and some other opportunities, you can do things for today's income as well. So we got a couple strategies, and it's more than just knowing the strategy. It's the same thing as everybody knows to go lift weights and eat the right things. But unless you do it and you do it with the right equipment and with the right process, you're not going to have the outcome you want. So in the same way with these investments, you have to have the right outlet with the right people, the right operators, all that stuff. And so we want to connect people in that way. All right. That'll do it for part 1 with Dr. Mark Costas on the Dentalpreneur podcast. We'll pick up next time talking about investments and more. So be sure to come back next week for part 2. Thanks for listening in to Wealth Beyond the White Coat. Your time and attention mean a lot to us. If you found value in today's episode, please consider leaving us a review on your favorite podcast platform and share it with your colleagues and friends. Your feedback helps us grow and reach more professionals like you striving for financial freedom. Until next time, keep pushing the boundaries of your financial health. Thank you for joining us on this journey to wealth beyond the white coat.